In other news, is our nation chock full of psychotics? Looking at the types of medication Americans take regularly, apparently the answer is yes. Hard not to watch TV anymore and not see an advertisement for some sort of antipsychotic medication. Take, for example, this ad for the drug Abilify.
Here's me, and here's my depression. Before I started taking Abilify, I was taking an antidepressant alone. Most days I could put on a brave face and muddle through, but other days I still struggled with my depression. I was managing, but it always had a way of creeping up on me. I felt stuck. I just couldn't shake my depression. So I talked to my doctor. He said adding Abilify to my antidepressant could help with my depression, and that some people had symptom improvement as early as 1 to 2 weeks. He also told me about a free trial offer from Abilify. Now, I feel more in control of my depression.
Right. Then they go on to talk about, look out, here's all the side effects. Anyhow, back in the old days, antipsychotics like Abilify were taken only by a very, very few people, mostly seriously mentally troubled individuals. But today they're all the rage. In fact, in 2008, antipsychotics became the #1 selling type of prescription drug in America, with over $14 billion in annual sales. More people are taking antipsychotics than high cholesterol drugs and acid reflux medications. So what's the reason for this apparent surge in psychosis in America? Are drug companies taking us for a ride? James Ridgway is a senior correspondent at Mother Jones Magazine. He addresses this issue in a recent article and joins me now to talk more about it. James, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Great to have you with us. Does this explain our wars? We're all psychotic?
Well, I don't think you need to go that far, but
Well, alternatively, might it explain the lack of, why are people on the streets in Greece and not in the United States? Is it because we're all medicated? I've read statistics that 1 in 10 Americans is on some sort of serious psychological medication.
I think the real thing here is that it really hits the edges of the population. It hits the kids, who are certainly taking a lot of things, but it hits the old people, because the way you sort of like stupefy the old and keep them warehoused and passive.
So this is the chemical equivalent of restraints for people, for cheaply warehousing old people and for cheaply teaching unruly kids.
Yeah, not only that, but prisons, use these drugs. I can remember reading a deposition of the warden in Angola prison in Louisiana, Burl Cain, who said that half the population of 5,000 was on drugs.
Whoa.
That's quite a few people.
And it's not a good sign for where they're going to go or how they're going to be when they get out. I mean, that's not rehabilitation. Are we? Is this Soma? If you know what I'm talking about? I think was it Huxley's Brave New World? Soma, the drug that got eventually put into everybody's food, and everybody, and everybody became happy. I mean, are we stupefying our culture, or is it pretty much confined to old people and kids that we're stupefying?
No, I think it's. Look, I think it goes, cut it another way. This has to do with the relationship of the pharmaceutical industry, which makes this stuff, and the psychiatrists. Because you couldn't do one without the other.
Right.
In other words, the psychiatrists give out prescriptions for this.
Right.
And it turns out that the psychiatrists are on the take with the industry.
How so? How does it work?
They end up being on the boards of directors of the consultants with the pharmaceutical companies. They're paid to do various events with the pharmaceutical companies, and so that they have a vested interest in all of this. Right. I think that this sort of like corporate involvement of these two bodies is at the heart of a lot of things here.
Wow. So it's like the private prison industry makes money every time there's a prisoner. So they lobby for tighter laws against smoking pot and longer sentences. And on the other hand, the drug companies make more money every time somebody's diagnosed as psychotic. And so they lobby basically the psychiatrists to diagnose more people as psychotic and prescribe more antipsychotic medications.
Yeah. I remember when I was suffering from depression, I went to a psychiatrist, and he said, he pulled out a questionnaire, and he said, do you ever feel blue? Do you ever think you're going to fall off the tracks in front of a train? A couple of questions like that. Yeah. And he said, so I answered the questions, and he said, you make the grade. here. And he went to a filing cabinet. He pulled open the doors, and there were all these boxes of samples. He said, try this.
Right.
I tried that and made me go completely nuts.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. I mean, a psychologist is going to do talk therapy because they can't prescribe drugs. Psychiatrists, have, by and large in the United States, given up talk therapy because all they do is prescribe drugs.
Right, exactly. But I know that the psychologists are supposed to get off the hook on this deal. And everyone says, well, the psychiatrist may be in the pocket of the industry, but the psychologists are really...
But now the psychologists are lobbying for the right to prescribe drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think this thing about the psychologists is like such a great deal. I mean, they're the ones that also, you know, encourage you to take drugs. So.
Yeah. So how are drugs like Abilify different from previous generation antipsychotics that just produce drooling stupefaction?
Well, they change your they supposedly change your behavior, but you know, it all depends on the person and the way you prescribe. Psychiatric medicine is you try something. If it works, great, you can do that. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else.
Right.
You can go through a whole bunch of drugs. It doesn't really have anything to do with a known medical condition, or not necessarily has to do with that.
Right.
And the big thing here is, look, if you're on one of these drugs, you've got to refill it, because if you start to crash, you run out of the drug, you start to crash. Okay, so you've got to refill it. So you got to call up the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, no problem, come and visit me, $400
right.
for 5 minutes.
So you're dealing with a pusher now, and you've become
yeah,
an
they're
addict.
pushing. The thing is pushers.
That's basically it. James, thanks so much for being with us tonight. It's great meeting you. I appreciate it.